Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 11th Climate Change Committee meeting. The first order of business is to look at the agenda here. So let me bring that up. To share. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. There's our agenda. Of course, the first order of business, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's take care of that. Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, roll call wise, we have most of our members here. I know that Rich Soper and Drew Martin were not going to be able to attend today, so that's expected. Otherwise, we do have a quorum. And let's move on to adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments or things that they'd like to add or change in the agenda as you see on the screen? With no one mentioning any suggested changes, can I have a motion to accept the agenda as written, please?
Stacy motions to accept the agenda.
And a second, please.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, off we go. That's unanimous. Next thing we'll want to do is schedule our next meeting. In keeping with our every other month schedule, we usually meet about the second Saturday of the month, but I'll be out of the country that day or that week. I was going to suggest that we shoot for either the Saturday the 20th of August or Saturday the 27th of August. Does anyone have a preference for either of those two dates or a problem with the dates? Anyone have a preference for the 20th or the 27th? Okay.
I'm thinking the 20th might be better because the 27th is later in the month. Kids are going back to school. I can see where there would be maybe more vacationers here, families.
Okay.
But either is fine with me, but that would just be my thought.
Okay. So why don't we go for the 20th tentatively, and I'll check with the other folks involved to make sure that that date is also good for them. Tentatively, we'll set our next meeting for Saturday, August 20th, still via Zoom, and we'll still shoot for 10 a.m. because I think that seems to work reasonably well for everyone. So August 20th it is then. All right. We have some follow-up from some different things we've been doing over the past couple of meetings. The first up is the U of D seminar that was held on May 6th that both Phil and Deborah attended. Deborah or Phil, which of you would like to go first? I'll bring up your notes from that so you can use that as a guide. Which one of you would like to go first on that, please?
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay, you spoke up first, so Deborah, let me bring up your notes here and have you able to use them as a guide here. There we go. And of course, we're looking for just a recap. You don't have to go through each item, in great detail, but just to give us a feel for what the content felt like in terms of it's applicable to us. Any contacts you were able to make that you think would be helpful in going forward that we can work with to move our agenda forward. So, Deborah, all yours.
So first off, these are just rough notes because I have a tendency to write everything down. And so you can review the notes, and I thought maybe it would be best just to give an overview. And the overview is that flooding is going to happen. Of course, what happened in Dewey a few weeks ago with that storm and the beach coming up was certainly an indicator, but by the year 2050, it is expected that we will have 10 times the flooding that we have now. And generally speaking, what needs to occur is to do a balancing act about what works for Dewey. Looking at knowing that flooding is going to happen, do we just say that certain areas are off limits? You cannot build there, and any structures that are there are not going to be serviced, such as with roads and things of that sort? Do we make specific accommodations, but for prioritizing certain areas, such as whether it's park, police, fire, versus residential versus commercial? Or do we just let it happen and allow people to deal with what occurs? So those balancings need to be analyzed about where our priorities are as a town and where we want to invest both time and, most importantly, money, because we need to do a planning that will prioritize where it is we want to best protect and how we want to protect it. In looking at that, there have been a number of towns, such as Milton, that are far ahead of what we've done. Apparently, Milton is frequently underwater, and so they hired a company to make their plan and analyze the priorities. The town made its decisions about with getting public input about how they were going to prioritize. Seems that they took certain areas that they knew were regularly going to be underwater, and they dictated that those areas would not be built upon. They had to protect a lot of historic sites, and they did a lot of planning for park areas. So they changed residential and other uses into areas that were that could withstand the water more easily. Additionally, I went on and collected a couple of cards while we were there. One was the town manager in Milton, and also the assistant town manager from Bethany Beach was there, and I got her card as well, as those both seem to be a little bit ahead of where we were, in my impression. It may be helpful to speak with each of them to better understand how they started the process. But I think everybody has fairly well concluded that we will be experiencing flooding at a much more rapid rate and much more severity than we have before. They expect generally that there would be a 1.3 feet of sea level rise by the year 2050, and that Delaware in the next 30 years can expect to have 16 inches of water sea level rise, which is pretty concerning. So generally speaking, it is something that we really need to focus on, the vulnerability and our abilities to adapt as a town, and how we want to prioritize what it is that we do so that we can put our best efforts into that, and then seek the type of grants that are available. There was a section of this conference that focused on, sorry, I'm skipping around a lot. I know that you're trying to catch up in my notes.
Okay, that's okay. That's fine.
That they used a phrase that seems to be commonly used called freeboarding, which is elevating the first floor, requiring the elevation of first floor for any building above the base level for expected flooding. FEMA apparently sets that level, but it may, if our regulations in Dewey do not meet that, that may be something we need to address fairly immediately. We need to figure out if we wanted what kind of protections we want to implement, such as flood walls or flood panels or barriers of whatever type around necessary structures, such as where our electrical facilities are or our water or things of that sort. Those may be priorities that we want to contemplate. Whether or not we want to designate certain areas as avoidance areas where we do nothing and we just tell people not to live there, or whether we're going to be looking after that. So that's generally.
Quick question, Deborah.
Yes.
And the view that I have on screen now under grants, are the grants that I've highlighted there available for planning and implementing? Are they FEMA grants that you've identified, or is that a different source?
They are FEMA grants, but it requires a pre-planning, which in Milton, they hired this company and they spent, I think, and Phil, you can correct me, I think they said it was 6 or 7 years of planning that they did. And so by the time you apply for those grants, you have to really know what you're doing so that FEMA is more likely to give those to you.
Right.
Grants seem to be something that professionals, people with substantial experience are best able to secure, but they are through FEMA, and they seem to be quite a lot of available grants if you create your plan in such a way that you're ready to go.
Got it. I'll just scroll down here. Let me know if there's anything else that you add to that.
Just that there are some private grants as well that are available. And looking at the Milton, where the town manager spoke, they used their consultants and implemented the overall project. Took approximately 8 years from the planning stages to the completion. And that once they had that, it took 6 months to a year just to write the grant and get it submitted. And then it takes about another year to receive the grant money. One of the places that they used was this Brownsfield grant, which was for redevelopment. So again, in applying for the grant, are you looking at it for planning purposes? Are you looking at it for implementation? So you have to know exactly what you're seeking before you even can contemplate applying for anything.
Very good. I'd suggest as a follow-up, why don't you and I, Deborah, have a conference call with both those two folks you identified, the town manager from Milton and the assistant town manager from Bethany. We can do it separately and, do a little bit more in-depth talk with them on, what they've done, and maybe they'll be willing to share some more information that may not be publicly available on their website, that sort of thing. So if you're willing to participate with me, let's plan to do that between now and the next meeting.
Excellent. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let me switch over here and now go back to. Oh, by the way, there were two documents. Let me go back here for a minute and share screen. I might as well do this now and get it out of the way. We have established, thanks to Ashley setting this up for us, a Dropbox with information that we can use and consider a repository for our work. I started to upload some things in the last day or two to that, and I specifically put in this folder for the U of D May 6th seminar, which includes the two PDFs or the presentations that were made. Those have been uploaded too, as well as Deborah and Phil's notes we're about to talk about. I have just set these up, but I haven't done the sharing. What I'll do is I'll send out an email to everyone on the committee, and Gary, of course, Bill, with the links so that you can access these and take a look at them and follow up. And then I'll go back through the organization of this and when we hit our next agenda item. So
Dave, can I ask, how will we access that repository? Will you give us will it be a direct link and it'll just open, or do we have to go in and sign in somehow?
I think it'll be a direct link, Marty, but I'll verify that.
Okay.
If I send you the link directly to those folders, and there's 3 folders actually, and I'll send you a link to each one, which should give you access to be able to view. This is a bit of a work in process, but I think it'll be that simple.
I actually tried to find it, found it, but I could see that I couldn't open it. So that's,
Okay. Yeah. I didn't want to do it ahead of time because we're just sort of a work in process the way we've organized it so far. I wanted to review that with everyone, which we'll do in just a couple of minutes once Phil does his review here of the meeting. But yeah, we'll make sure that everyone on the committee and everyone who needs access can have access. Now I need to go to share screen again and pull up the notes that Phil had made for the meeting. Everyone should be able to see that. Phil, would you like to give an overview of your impressions and experience at the meeting too? Phil? See, you're there, but we have no picture of you, and we're not getting any sound. Are you muted by chance? Doesn't look like there's an icon there. Phil, are you there? Okay. Well, Phil is here, but he's doing one of those things that I think kids do when they do Zoom at school. He's really not here, but he's here. So if that's the case, if we get Phil back and we're able to have him participate here in the next few minutes, we'll go back to this item, and let me stop this for now. Okay. Let me go back to okay, so that was the recap by Deborah and hopefully Phil on the Creating a Flood Ready Community seminar. We have some follow-up with that Deborah and I will do. The next one is for potential funding sources, which Drew's not here today, but Stacy's going to give us an update. Stacy, I know you've been looking at this since the last meeting and before. Just if you can, please give us whatever progress you've made on identifying funding sources.
Yeah, so I had a meeting with Ashley Sanders, is the town clerk for Town of Dewey, and she was immensely helpful. So previously in our meetings, we had talked about I think it was a grant consultant that we wanted to pursue in order to find out, what was going on with the town and what could we do more, right? And Ashley explained to me that she has done submissions for grants in before her role here, and so she is the one that's actually submitting the grants, and she only reaches out to that consultant upon her questions. So that wasn't so she does have that access, but it's mainly us dealing with Ashley from here on out. And so she walked me through what was going on. Obviously, there was the town hall grant that she had worked on. There was another one. I think it just came up for submission. I think, is it the gazebo on by Ivy, that little gazebo area? And then the next one is the document I sent you, Dave. I don't know if you want to show that to everyone.
Yeah, let me do that.
It's an opportunity for us. However, we have a deadline of September 30th. So this is a grant that Ashley is working on with the Department of Interior, Fish and Wildlife Services. And I think it's from $200,000 to $6 million opportunity for us to submit what projects that we could do in order to receive funds for it. So given we don't have 6 to 7 years to prepare for something like that, if you just scroll down, it just shows the eligibility on the first page, and then and then the additional information on the bottom. There we go. Yeah, that's kind of the description of it. So it's focused on protecting fish and wildlife, but it's also conservation. So I've done quite a bit of research on stuff that we can do, and in the timeline that we have without hiring and with like not a lot of time to pull this together, it seems like the overall theme that everyone is talking about is planting fish or not fish, plants in the waters as well as outside the waters to have their roots hold in the soil to avoid erosion. It's not going to stop flooding, but it may help on the smaller storms and the smaller floodings. Other than that, I think this is an opportunity. I was so excited to hear from Phil and Deborah on what was going on with their program, to see if there's any type of suggestions that they got in order so that we could quickly move forward with a submission for this particular grant. And Ashley also explained to me that this is something that comes up periodically. So this is not like a one-time done opportunity for us, but it is something that we can actually jump into. And so she is going to submit a project for this. It's just our committee coming up with recommendations for her in order for her to add on things that work in collaboration with our committee. Additionally, I just wanted to share that I offered my help with Ashley. So if she needed, writings and any kind of direction that she needed help with in terms of submissions for this grant, that I would offer my services for that. And in addition to not only this, is there are numerous grants out there. There's so many private companies out there, but they're all geared to specific issues. Like, for instance, quality of water in the Bay. There's like a lot of grants opportunities that we can do with that, but that's more or less, not necessarily with flooding. And I think flooding is our biggest concern at this point in time. Does anybody have any questions?
Gary? You're muted, Gary.
There we go. Okay. It's not a question, but just to share something with you that popped in my mind as we were going through this, related to grant funding, but it's also related to something that Phil had in his summary of the meeting regarding a hazard mitigation program. We should be part of the Sussex County hazard mitigation program, but we are not as yet. And I had a note from Dawn, our building official, who indicated that we're still working on becoming part of the Sussex County Hazard Mitigation Program for 2022. And in fact, we will need to be accepted into that program in order to submit some grant funding requests to other agencies within the state. So, and that may apply to county as well. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that it's something the town is working on. And once we're part of that, it may expand some of the grant opportunities.
Gary, what's the time frame and who's working on that, did you say?
I don't know. Dawn is the person to talk to about this, and she's not on the call today. I don't know if Bill Zolper has any additional details.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. When I came on, we were not part of the hazard mitigation plan. And it's not, you just don't sign up for it. It's a process. You have to go to so many seminars online. You have to meet so many deadlines. And on top of everything else, what Dawn's doing, she is doing it. It's about a year process to do this, to get accepted. And once you're in the program, you're eligible for more grants, as Gary has said. But Dawn is the one that's spearheading that, and it is a priority for her. But it's a process. It's just not you sign up and you're on.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to ask Stacy can you please work with Drew to do two things for me? Us. One, can you make a list of the funding sources, the grant opportunities that you've, identified, and whatever things you can do to characterize, anything we know about them at this point, such as, is there a particular focus, things of that nature? Because part of what we need to do in putting together an overall report is put in, and whether it's an appendix or it's in the document, depends on the length, I guess, a list of the grant sources that we've identified and any intel that we can provide about them. So I'll ask you and Drew to please put that together for us by, the next meeting. Actually, if you can you do it within the next few weeks and share it with me, and we'll put it on the repository so we can talk about it in the next meeting, if that's okay.
Sure.
So something, if you guys can handle that in the next few weeks. And also, will you work with Ashley? I think you guys certainly have enough understanding and can articulate what our committee needs might be to factor into what Ashley's already working on for the grant that's underway. So why don't you folks take the baton on that one and handle that as well? I think you're up to speed on what she's doing, and I think that'll be a fairly easy thing. Obviously, there's already the work that she's doing, and our needs are probably just additive to that. So if you guys would also work with her on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. And if anybody else has, suggestions, or they come across an article or something like that that they think, please send it our way, and we'll include that in our work.
We'd like you to folks, since we've been kind of doing this on an assignment basis with a couple of people in each sort of team, have you folks be the folks who assemble the list of the grant sources for us. You've been going through the discussions, and obviously we need to come up with a list, whether it won't be complete, of course, but at least everything we know. And we can include on that the Sussex County Hazard Mitigation Program that we just learned about, and include that. That sounds like a good one. Eventually, we'll need to get to things like what's the timing, expected lead times, and that sort of thing. But let's at least get the list going at this point. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be a working document for sure, because there's numerous grants out there. There's private and there's public, right? So
just a table in a Word document that lists all the key attributes that you can, and as we work through this, we'll fill it in. A lot of this information and a lot of the work that we're doing now is still very preliminary, and we're not going to complete a whole lot of meaty work, I think, by the end of this committee year, given that our next meeting will be in August, and the new committees will be formed in October or so. But it is a work in progress. This is a big problem we're trying to deal with, and it's going to take some time to get our not only our mind and our arms around it, but also get the right reporting and feedback that we do over time. Now that we have Phil back, Phil?
No idea what was the problem with that system, but what can I say? It's Windows or who knows what. Yeah.
You were there and you were just pretending you were present for the
No,
test.
I could hear everything and see it, but my video wasn't working, and that's never happened before. So I started all over again, and I don't know if you got my text message or not.
No, but I'm about to bring up your notes from the meeting so you can a quick review of those for us. Here we go.
Okay. Well, along with what Deb said about the thing in our notes, I don't know how many people on the committee have looked at the stormwater master plan that was prepared by RK&K 4 or 5 years ago. It has a very clear plan of what needs to be done, and a matter of, and the town itself, I think, has prioritized a variety of projects and even gotten estimates of the cost. My point being is a great deal of work really has been done on this for at least 6 years. We have the master plan, and it does talk about this area of the Bayside from Dagsworthy on down to Rodney, and what is to be done. So the biggest thing of all is, as she pointed out, or Stace did, is finding sources of funding. And Center for Inland Bays is working very hard on doing that as well. That's all I've got.
Okay, but we're talking about your the contacts, any contacts that you made and your impressions of the May 6th University of Delaware meeting.
Yeah, the whole state and the people are all aware of it. My point is that we have been studying and doing this for quite a few years.
Okay. And here you identified, you mentioned a hazard mitigation plan. Is that the Sussex plan, or is that?
I don't know if the town has one, and Bill, you might know the thing like that. I haven't been able to get an answer, but as it says in my report, if we don't have one, we can adopt the Sussex County one instead. But again, I don't know about that.
Okay. Okay, so let me now go back and still have the screen share here. Let me go back, since we're bouncing around here. Let me talk a little bit about, this is a later topic, but we'll do it now. The organization of we'll call it the repository of the information. The way Dropbox is organized, for those who haven't had much experience with it, this family room was set up originally, and I can't seem to do away with it, so it'll stay there, I guess. I set up 3 areas at this point. I set up an administrative folder, which has the comp plan tasks that were identified in the comp plan that we're currently dealing with, in the ongoing comp plan meeting and discussions, and also relating to our work, and then our committee membership. And as I said before, I'll share all these links with you so you can get direct access. There's information with both email, and we don't publish telephone numbers, but that'll be there in case you need to reach out to anyone on the committee. So that's in the, and also the minutes of the prior 2 meetings. Those will be uploaded there as well. The second area is the background area folder, where the report that we've talked about here, the Stormwater Master Plan, is residing, published by the Center of Inland Bays and with the work of RKK. So that's here as well for you to review, and I think we've talked about that in our prior meeting. It is a great resource for us, and we will utilize the value that it has for our purposes. There's also a couple of other documents that we've shared. This is one that is for the entire Mid-Atlantic region that I had, I believe, shared in a prior meeting. And then also another one locally here for the University of Delaware's work here about climate change impact and resiliency. So those 3 documents is a starting point. And there's a subfolder here called website links, with some of the things that we've already looked at, such as the ability to look at the flood level over a period of time in the mapping, and a few other resources. And finally, the information we just talked through, which is Phil and Deborah's notes and the 2 handouts that were given at the seminar at U of D on May 6th. So that's all there for everyone to look at in the background folder. And then finally, so we've got the administrative folder that has just the kind of things that we would need to look at from time to time. The background that we continue to accumulate the information we want to put. And then eventually we'll get to what a draft report and that sort of thing that as we begin to compile everything that we've been doing into a report to give to the town. So that's how the repository is organized at this point. You'll receive after this meeting, within an hour or so, I hope, links to access these folders so that you can review them. Does anyone have any suggestions on other folders that we could create here, or a different way that we could look at this or organize? I'm certainly open to making any changes that we need at this point. It's really just kind of getting things organized and started so we can access them. Any ideas or suggestions?
Could we put one for grants?
Sure.
Thank you.
And of course, like all the others, that'll be given as a link as well. I'll try to create a link that you can get to the whole top level, and then you can get to each of these individually rather than do it separately. And of course, what the work that Stacy and Drew and everyone else is ultimately doing, we'll start to file them here. Whenever you have documents that you think need to be put into the repository here, forward them to me and or Phil, and we will make sure that they get properly placed in here, so that we can have access, and it'll begin to populate pretty quickly here, I think, once we get some of these things further collected. Gary, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to make a suggestion. You may want to consider having a link in here to the relevant section of the town code that deals with flood damage reduction. That's chapter 101. Again, Dawn is the resident expert on the content of this chapter of the code, but I think Deborah raised the question earlier of whether or not our town requirements meet all of the FEMA requirements, and it does. That is really the purpose of chapter 101. So you really, if you're building a new structure, you have to elevate it to the basic FEMA flood level plus an additional foot, which is what we call freeboard.
Got it. And so we'll make a separate folder here for town charter and code references, something along those lines.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll do that after the fact and then share that with everyone. Okay, good. And I'll try to find the pointer. Would you say that's chapter 101?
Chapter 101, flood damage reduction.
Flood damage reduction. Okay. Let's see here, back to the agenda here for a moment and see where we are. So that was recap of funding sources. Deborah, other than the information that you found on Milton and Bethany, any other follow-up that you've received from your inquiries out? I know you had done some inquiries with folks down the Eastern Seaboard, Virginia and such. Any feedback or anything from any of those municipalities yet?
Pretty much everybody is saying that they are overwhelmed with requests and they are internalizing whatever they are gathering. People are not very open-minded to share, which is unfortunate because it seems that this issue could work far more productively for everybody if everybody collaborated, but there does not seem an interest or desire for that to happen.
Do you have any sense of whether that's for they're still really processing it and don't want to share like interim work product, or it's really proprietary or something like that?
So it seems to be multiple. One is that people feel like they've already invested all the time and energy and they're not all excited about sharing that. And a lot of people don't feel that they've made sufficient progress, that they have anything to share, but have said, if we get information, they would love to receive it from us. So unfortunately, I have not received an open door anywhere yet. And I've literally extended my attempts up and down the East Coast. So it's a bit frustrating, and I won't give up, but I'm not all that hopeful.
Let's plan to do this. Certainly, we talked about having a meeting with the folks from Milton and Bethany, and we'll follow up with that. I mean, they're closer to home anyway, and certainly we can learn from what they've done. I've reached out to both Rehoboth and gotten some initial information, but really just to say that what we have is still early stage, and we'll have more, and we'll happy to share it. And I haven't heard back from Lewis still. Perhaps Deborah, you and I can try to schedule also a little more time and focus on looking to see if we can get some feedback from Lewis, and maybe follow up on Rehoboth. If we do it together in a tag team approach, I think we'll we'll be a little bit more effective in getting some of these things lassoed. So let's plan for you and I to do that as a follow-up. Okay.
Dave,
Yeah, Marty. Yes.
I lost connectivity at some point. I think right at the end of when Stacy was talking about grant funding and working with Ashley and about the grant that might be available. She showed us a screen with plants and that sort of thing. I had a suggestion that might be considered there. I don't know what else I missed, so this may have come up when I was trying to get back in. The Center for the Inland Bays has that big plan that they have, and it includes something for the McKinley Street Marsh for shoreline stabilization. And I believe that maybe that document could be useful in trying to apply for one of those grants that is due in September. I don't know the details, and again, I didn't hear the rest of Stacy's presentation, but I wonder if that, because there is a document, there is a plan that's already in existence, and then pairing with the Center for the Inland Bays might give a grant application some more, clout.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you very much.
Okay, the document I'm talking about, we talked about it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's in the Stormwater Master Plan, I think, right? And
Yes, I think that is the title of it. So, there's definitely something with shoreline stabilization. It seems like that might be an avenue.
Yep.
that already exists. It wouldn't create as much work as trying to develop something.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Marty.
Sure.
if there's any follow-up needed, you folks can talk offline and work with Ashley to incorporate that. That does sound like a very easy way to plug in, the needs that we have into that grant process. Good, that's great. Okay, so I think we're done with that. Number one on the follow-ups and the committee member assignments. Everybody has a few follow-on things to do in time for the next meeting. For this year's committee, what I've tried to do here, not only organize the repository, which we've talked about, and you'll have information available on that. I've started to put together, I don't know if I'll call it yet, a table of contents that I wanted to talk about and review. So let me share that. Now, I know it's a little early to be figuring that we're going to put together a report. We're still early in the process. And I just realized that what we forgot to do is do the meeting minutes. So let me do that first. little out of order here today. Here is the meeting minutes from our April 9th meeting. Everyone should have received a copy, and I believe they're posted on the town website. I tried to go back through and capture most of the important content. There was a lot of good information in the meeting. If everyone's had a chance to review that, do I have any suggestions? Did everybody happy with it? And if so, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll see, that was easy. Look how efficient we are. Okay, so the meeting minutes have been adopted too. We close that and go on to what I was trying to get to here, which is now, this is a true work in process, and I did this over the last day or two, just trying to make sure that we had something that represented a starting point. I think what we need to do for the first iteration of any kind of report that we're going to do to the town is to try to put together a document about how we're approaching the issue, the strategy that we're taking, kind of divide and conquer, right? We're looking at what other folks are doing and collecting information about that. We're looking at grant sources and other sources of funding that we can utilize, and we're putting together a strategy plan, so to speak. We're not going to get to a lot of detail in the next, couple of months with the summer coming and, the number of meetings we can have. But I figured at least if we start to work on the outline of what this all would look like and how it would come together. So with any good document, if you consider this sort of a combination of a table of contents or something that starts to, edge toward a table of contents, and also, defines what things we are doing and how we're doing them. I just thought that this would be a straw man that we can look at, a straw person, that we can look at and frame our context here. So as in any good one, we'll have an executive summary, we'll have an introduction as to, who we are and why we're doing this and how that's going. We're framing the problem, and the problem that we're framing is climate change impact and sea level rise and resiliency for the town of Dewey. I think that's a generally true statement. So we're looking at three things. We're looking at background material and sources, and scope and definition of the committee's efforts and the key resources we'll be utilizing. We're just talking about what the problem is we're trying to solve and how we're equipped to do that. And then a section on our approach. We want to identify work that other municipalities have done, as we just said, and we're continuing to do, funding sources as we are continuing to do, and then what collaborations we'll have with, infrastructure committee and planning commission, of course, for all the reasons we've talked about, and also probably with marketing for public awareness on what the best practices are for dealing with sea level rise and storm management and such. And then, what our overarching strategies are here is, we're looking to utilize the stormwater master plan that's already been developed. We all agree on that. Work with the committees, as we just said, work with DelDOT on issues related with the streets in town, and the town government and the committees on the preparedness and education of property owners and visitors, with the council for significant funding sources. Those are kind of not the best way to phrase these or couch them, but I think they are some of the big items that we're looking to do, and sort of the pillars of what we've been talking about so far. And we should prioritize those strategies, and to the extent that we can, come up with an initial cost estimate, or at least a ballpark idea of how much we think is possibly the cost of these, and then develop a timeline for the next year and the next committee that will continue the work and take that on, and then a summary section. Gary, I know this is probably not exactly the way you would have organized it, but this is my best attempt to at least get something out there to use and move forward. And when I looked at this and I looked back to what our committee goals are, and it's worded a little differently, but I'm trying to get to something that we can start to put some things in and flesh out and create an overall report of what this year's committee is able to accomplish, and move into, when it comes time to start over again for next year or continue the work, we'll have something as a starting point to move forward with. So with all that said, can I have some comments on this? And more than happy to make any changes and reorient the thing as we see fit.
So first off, I think it's really helpful to have that before everybody. If it hasn't been sent out, I know at least I would appreciate having that, because it kind of lays everything out for how we progress from here. One thing that seems, and it may be not contemplated by this committee, but it seems that somebody needs to really analyze the town code regulations, so that we also understand what may be required in terms of change of those, such as requiring elevation of building structures and things like that. And so, okay, I see that you've got that there. That's what you mean by analyzing the governmental codes.
Part isn't mentioned there, so I'll make sure that before I send this out and share it with everyone, that we incorporate sort of the town code aspect of that as well. Sure.
Sorry, I didn't realize that's what was contemplated.
Dave?
Yeah, Gary.
I would just say this looks like a really good start to me. I mean, you seem to have hit all the major points. And people can fill in as necessary if they think there's something missing here. But again, it's a very good start.
Well, thanks. It's kind of a combination of just, almost a stream of consciousness in the topics we've been talking about, but I'm trying to get it organized in such a way that we can start to fill in sections and, build out the real documentation that we want to build, just to say that, all right, here's what we're doing to approach the problem. Here's the resources we're using and we're collecting. Here's how we're going to go about moving to the next step, which is more of a tactical way of looking at it, right? Which is, all right, exactly what are we going to do then, in what sequence we're going to do it. So I'm really just trying to frame the whole thing out. Why don't I do this? I'm happy to take more comments, but then, also I'll put it up on the repository as it is, making any changes that we come up with here at the moment. And then, anyone who wants to just add to it or thinks there's, a better wording or a different way of organizing a section, all happy to do it. We want to make this a combined document that everybody shares in the development of. So, okay. Any other question or any other comments on this and what we've talked about in this section? Phil, I know your strategy is embedded in here, and that is either raise the level of the town or keep the sea level out, right? That's the two.
That was Rob Whitford's comment.
There you go. Okay, so that covers that topic. Let's see, where are we back to on our agenda here? I put in a note, as I probably always should and will, of a group discussion on any strategies and remedies for both storm and sea level mitigation. I think, just to spend a few minutes on this, I think that we're talking about sea level rise a lot, and yet the storm mitigation, the storm management, and how we deal with and prepare for it. I know there's been some work done, and I think I've said in a previous meeting, there's actually a section on the town website that deals with that I think Dawn had prepared. We need to do more education for folks, both residents and property owners and visitors to the town, on how to manage when a big storm comes, because they seem to be coming more often and with more severity, right? So, does anybody have any comments or threads of discussion that they want to bring up today in talking about that kind of thing, different ways they think we ought to approach it? Somebody threw out, ultimately for the Bayside, we could build a seawall. Well, that's a strategy, right? That's a recommendation we could make as part of the work we're doing if we think that's a productive way of looking at it. So I'll just open up for anybody who wants to offer any kind of input and make any suggestions about that kind of stuff, please. Marty, why don't you take a run at this for us?
You want me to say my opinion about?
Just give any thoughts that you have about, different ways, different things that we haven't talked about already that can be, things that we should be considering when we meet together.
Well, when I'm walking around through Seabreeze, I notice that they certainly have a seawall at the end there. And I know Phil has mentioned that a few times, and I know that there are reasons for that not being popular, but more and more I'm thinking maybe it is something that we consider. The other thing that I wonder about is, and I don't know how this would be, creating almost ditches where water could go so that it doesn't flood other places. Not quite sure where we would put those, that it wouldn't impact other people. But those are things that I consider as I'm walking around thinking, how do we do this? And then, Phil has talked a lot, and I guess I don't want to take his thunder, about what they've done in Holland, and, so I'll let him talk about that.
That's a good segue. Phil, anything?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, if you go back to the 2017 Stormwater Master Plan, then some of that work has already been done, such as the end of Reed Avenue. And what's been done at Reed Avenue with building up the level with sand and HESCO barriers, as well as riprap out there, they have exactly the same plan for Sunset Park at the end of, what street is that, Dagsworthy? And at McKinley with the McKinley Marsh. I mean, those like Marty that live around the McKinley Marsh are fully aware of what they call the Hayden Road River, where the bay, invades and floods into the road with super high tides. And as we experience more hurricanes, and in particular the nor'easters seem to be the worst thing for us, raising that along the bayfront, either with a seawall or with beaches, as they've done at the end of Reed, is critical. And we've been studying this a long time, and there is a plan that the town has with actually funding amounts tied to it, for everything from McKinley and Bellevue, Van Dyke, Dickinson, what have you. Who actually did that money thing, I have no idea, but it's a couple of years old.
Which plan are you referring to, Phil? Is that part of the stormwater master plan, or is that something?
Yeah, part of the stormwater master plan.
Okay, what's in there? Okay.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. I just feel what we're doing with this committee is so much reinventing the wheel of things that have been done. Center for Inland Bays has worked this dramatically for years, and they are also seeking funding of the thing. So working with them, finding the sources, that's the critical thing. But
I don't think we're trying to reinvent anything. I think we're trying to take advantage of work others have done. And the stormwater master plan, as once we found that and realized what it was, is going to be an important component of all the work that we do going forward. We probably need to tighten up that relationship in terms of how we can jointly work on funding with Center of Inland Bays, on some of those projects, and take it from there. So, all good. Stacy, anything from you?
Well, one thing I wanted to have everybody keep in mind, I know, like when we talk about seawall, or obviously those are things that we would want to have a grant associated with. And in the documents that I've read on, various grants, it's also whatever we are focused on the project, like a seawall, it's how it interacts with all the other towns around us. For instance, if we just happen to raise Dewey up, 4 feet, then all the flooding goes to our neighbor towns, right? So those are things that we have to keep in mind, that when we apply for these grants, it's not that we're solving the problem. We're solving a big problem, not just with us, but like it's almost like it has to be seamless with everybody else. So that's just one thing I want to keep in mind. And then the second thing I want to say is that when we have a big storm come through, we literally have water underneath us. We have water to the front of us, to the back of us, with the ocean and the bay. And then, of course, when the rain comes down, it's on top of us. So when we think about ways to move water, I think we have to think totally different, right? So where does the water go? And I think that's, I'm sure it's been done before, but I think it's more than just building up walls. I think we have to move water. If water's coming in at a rapid rate, as it does with a storm, it needs to go somewhere other than within our homes and our, streets. And I don't know what that looks like, but that's in essence what we need to do and need to find a way to do. And I think it's a multi-layered effect. So it's not just one thing that we do, like build a wall or whatever. I think it's a whole ecosystem that we do. I've researched that there's actual plants, trees, shrubs, and flowers that soak up water. That's probably not enough, but it's those kind of things that we need to start thinking about, and like a paradigm shift, thinking about how we attack this problem.
Good point. On that seawall thing that you mentioned about, made me think, as soon as you end the seawall, the next place down is going to take a lot of water, right? So if you end the seawall somewhere, the next entity is going to really suffer as a result of that. Let's see, Deborah, any feedback or comments?
Just two things. One is in looking at the stormwater report, I think it would be helpful to know what of that is current, whether any of that needs to be updated, and which parts of that we may be able to implement more quickly than others. The second is, I really think, and this was emphasized during that conference, that we need to, as a town, prioritize what are we trying to protect? Is it realistic to protect all of our existing shoreways, all of our existing homes, all of our existing commercial enterprises, as well as all of our existing public buildings? Or do we need to more concentrate on some areas versus the other? And so it seems to me, as we're going through this, understanding whether we are looking at all of that to try to fix, or just certain areas may be important.
Great, I like that. When we're talking to Milton especially, and Bethany also, I guess, we should ask them, how they went about that. Have they prioritized what they, is it abatement? Is it a retreat? Those kinds of things in certain areas. And we need to be realistic about what we can do and, what can't be done, right? That kind of thing. Okay.
Dave,
Gary?
just one other comment. There's a lot of talk about the Stormwater Master Plan, and the Infrastructure Committee has been doing a lot with respect to the Stormwater Management Plan. I think, Marty, you're on that committee, I believe.
I am.
It might make sense for someone, perhaps Marty, just to give a report at your next meeting on where the Infrastructure Committee stands with respect to that plan, because there has been a lot of work done. There has been money that has been provided for some of the projects in there. So I think it would be good to get a nice update on where we stand.
That would be a great idea. Marty, will you happily take that on?
I'll see what they have and report back the next time.
Okay, we'll make that an agenda item on what infrastructure is doing and what.
I'd like to add something else. I went first, so hearing everybody else gave me yet another idea. When we are trying to either hold back or redirect the water, we really have to look at the impact about where we are directing it. And not only, as we're talking about, to the next town, when we are holding back the water, where are we going to direct it directly into someone's yard or someone's house? And living right next to the marsh, I'm keenly aware of that and the impact. And, I feel like we need a wall behind our property to make sure that the marsh water, when it overflows, doesn't flow right into our property. And our homes are on pilings, but nonetheless, there is still, it's not just, there's some area at the bottom that floods and has flooded during Sandy. And again, in last October, we had some, not as bad as Sandy, but, that's an immediate direction, not just for our properties, but the people who live along Vista Road. And, I'd rather see the water going down a road than going into somebody's homes.
I have a quick question before we end for Bill and for Phil. Bill and Bill. Bill, you from time to time post pictures of flooding. Is it on Reed that you take the pictures normally, I think? Isn't it Reed?
Yeah, it's mostly Reed Street and sometimes McKinley, depending on the weather.
So what's the status? I know that a lot of work's been done on Reed. How effective has it been in managing the, the flooding on Reed?
So, Phil lives on the street, but the pipes have all been redone on Reed Street. The outfalls there are still being worked on. We did do some work moving some of the riprap around. The issue is it comes down McKinley Street, hits the marsh, makes a left, comes down to Reed Street and goes out there. A lot of it is not coming over the dune on Reed Street. And if I'm wrong, Phil, let me know. But most of it's the rainwater coming off of McKinley Street and the rainwater on Reed Street, and the drains can't get the water out of there because the pipes during the high tide, the water just can't go out. Phil, am I off base?
Well, that's pretty accurate, Bill. The whole, if we have a high tide, Reed Avenue and all the west side of Dewey is only 1.5 feet, 2 feet above sea level. So if we have a 2.5 foot tide, the water just can't drain away. You know, it's simple physics with that. But preventing the seawater from coming in is what we have done a good job of reducing, with the exception of the low point of McKinley Marsh and over on Dagsworthy. But that's all planned for to fix at some point. Certainly draining, as we've done by replacing the pipes, either lining or replacing the pipes, has a great effect of moving the water down towards the bay. But if the bay is full, it can't drain until the tide goes down. And I've watched that over the years. Tide goes down, the water drains away nicely. Tide comes up, it's got no place to go. So
Yeah.
I think things are moving along well. It's probably, as somebody else pointed out, a matter of prioritizing things, and preventing the flooding is, you know, either with the seawall or raising the beach, and all that is the thing to do it. Center for Inland Bays, for whatever reason, doesn't like the idea of a seawall. I'm not sure exactly why, but they don't. They would prefer to raise a beach, as they've done at the end of Reed, with what they call the shoreline preservation or something like that. That's not a bad idea.
Let's do this. Maybe we should title our report when we finally create it. Bayside flooding is like playing whack-a-mole, right? You solve it for Reed, it moves from McKinley. You solve it from McKinley, it moves in from whatever, you know, that kind of thing. So we're playing sea rise whack-a-mole. Well, thanks everyone. I think that's good for today. Appreciate the time, and let's all follow up on the efforts. Yeah, Bill, please.
Just a real quick, I want to thank Stacy for getting up with Ashley about the grants. Thank you so much on that. We are working on a number of different grants, just not for flooding, but also for the town hall and for the lifeguard station and for Sunset Park. But thanks, Stacy. Deborah and Phil for going to that meeting and the report back. We are getting beach replenishment sometime this fall. A date isn't really set. The federal government picks up 65% of that right now, and the state picks up the 35% of it. There's talk about this, the federal government going to 90 and the state picking up 10. Denrex also told us that if they had their way, the towns would pick up more of it. But right now, Dewey Beach is the only one that actually has a fund for beach replenishment. None of the other 7 coastal towns from Lewis to Fenwick have any. And one of the reasons they don't is because they didn't want the state coming to say, hey, you should use your money to redo the dunes. During the 7-day storm that we had, the nor'easter, the dunes did their job, right? They really did. 7 days of wind blowing and high tides did a lot of damage, but the dunes did what they were supposed to. We lost about 5 feet in depth, 5 feet in depth. And the ocean will bring all that sand back to us eventually, even before we get the replenishment in the fall. I reached out to Cliff Gravier, who's the town manager down in Bethany, while we were having this conversation. They've never gotten a grant from FEMA, but they are currently working on one. He said it's a slow process, as Deborah said. I also reached out to Terry Tiemann, who's the assistant town manager down there. I will reach out to the town manager up in Milton to try to get some more information from him. I think on Reed Street, Dagsworthy Street, Bellevue, McKinley, they're all going to flood. The reason Bellevue and Bayard doesn't flood right now is that the town invested about $1 million in that pump station. But when you have the October nor'easter that came through, the pump station couldn't keep up with it, and it came over the berm. You're all right. The water's got to go somewhere. Every time somebody builds a new bulkhead or somebody puts up another wall, the water just gets pushed somewhere else. In the 70s, when we didn't have all the bulkheads and all the building for all these people's homes down here in Dewey Beach, the flooding wasn't that. I mean, we had floods, but it wasn't as bad. But now everybody's got a home right up on the water, and it causes issues. It's something we got to live with because we're down here. It doesn't mean we don't come up with plans and look at grants and try to figure out a way to do it. But when you put a wall up, Bay Resort, let's say, wants to do something there about their beach and they want to raise that level up, that's going to push the water somewhere else, right? So, I mean, anytime you do any improvements to any of your property, wall, a bulkhead, a berm, the water's just going to go somewhere else. It has to. When you push the water this way, it goes that way. And the bay is only so big. So, but it's really good to hear this committee. And I agree with Gary that the infrastructure committee and this climate committee are intertwined. And I think it's important that they both know what each one is doing. So thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, with no further business, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second, Stacy seconds.
Thanks. Everyone have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk again by email. Thanks very much. Take care.